Hello and welcome everyone to Flow Living TV. I'm Alisa Vitti, founder of Flow Living, author of Woman Code. I'm so excited to be joined today by the most amazing, the man who discovered the microbiome, Dr. Raphael Kellman. Welcome, Dr. Kellman. We're so happy to have you today.
Thank you, Lisa. Very nice to be here.
Yes, and we're going to be having a really essential for you to be listening to conversation about women, hormones, hormonal testing, your gut, how it's all connected to your hormones and your fertility. And I don't even want to keep us from that because Dr. Kellman has so much important, vital, crucial information to share. But before I start asking him all the questions that I have on your behalf, I want to share a little bit about who this extraordinary man is and why we're talking to him today. So Dr. Kellman is a true pioneer in functional medicine. He's been practicing for 17 years. He's treated more than 40,000 patients. And what's really why I feel sort of kindred with you, Dr. Kellman, is because so many people have come to see him from all over the world after years of like trying to go figure out what's wrong with them. And, they finally get their answers by coming to see Dr. Kellman at his wonderful center in Manhattan. He really looks at the root causes of disease. And, of course, he recently published a really fantastic book called The Microbiome Diet, drawing on his latest research in, genetics, hormones, biochemistry, and all of his years of practice to really help people achieve optimal health. He graduated from the Albert Einstein College of Medicine in New York, and he's practiced at Beth Israel, Lenox Hill, St. John's. He even worked doing cancer research at Sloan Kettering Memorial Hospital. So there's just so much wisdom that you have accrued over all of this amazing work that you've done. And now he practices at the Kellman Center, which we'll give links to that website at the end of our chat today. But Dr. Kellman, again, welcome. And I want to just sort of jump right in with the very first question, which is, why are women, especially, in your experience, so commonly and chronically misdiagnosed and be undiagnosed for years and years, despite their best efforts to seek out medical support for symptoms that they feel that they're having, and then they're just not getting the answers that they're looking for?
Yes, Lisa, it's a question that I reckon with all the time. So many people are not being diagnosed properly, or they're not being diagnosed at all. I find this to be a common problem amongst women, mostly because I think women are seeking optimal health. They know that there's a solution out there. They intuitively feel that the approach has been wrong in trying to assess their problems. They go with their intuition, perhaps more with men. I think men tend to shy away from doctors a bit more. But that's an issue in itself. Who does this affect more? My gut reaction is women, and this could be for another discussion. This is the problem, Alisa, and to all your listeners, is that doctors are relying on their routine screening, on their routine blood tests, which is almost like a demigod for so many medical doctors and the medical establishment, that irrespective of what your symptom is, you could be complaining of fatigue for 15 years and brain fog and poor memory and difficulty concentrating and mood not being optimal and gut issues. And you go to your doctor, and after a whole battery of tests and blood testing and a cardiogram, etc., and maybe a sonogram or two, $40,000 later, Mrs. Smith, I have good news for you. Everything is fine. But Mrs. Smith thinks to herself, but I don't feel fine.
Right.
Well, the doctor says, you're fine. Well, what about my fatigue? Well, what do you expect? You're no longer 30 and she's only 44,
Right.
Well,
right.
my food is not so great. Well, if you want, I'd be glad to write a prescription for Paxil or Prozac. I can't lose weight. I don't know why. I mean, it's only 15 pounds, but why is it that my metabolism has changed so radically? Well, maybe you're eating more than you think. And then she leaves insulted, frustrated, confused. And then the search
Sound
goes on.
familiar, ladies? Yeah.
I see this a day in and day out. This could be going on for 10 years, 12 years, 14 years for women.
Yeah.
And, these are intelligent people, authentic, sincere, and they really feel that, well, they feel confused, but eventually they'll feel, once again, hopefully, empowered to believe in themselves, to continue this journey, to finally get to the right model, the right way of approaching.
Well, and in fact, Dr. Kellman, this is exactly what happened for me. I, as you talked about, intuitively felt that there was something off with my hormones, with my health, and I went and did all the routine exams, and they said everything was fine and I was normal until I pushed on the PCOS research and brought that to my gynecologist and said, I think this is what I have. And then it was an obvious, oh, why didn't I suggest that in the first place? And then, of course, there was nothing to be done at that point. So sometimes you not only not get the information, but then if you even do get to a place where you might have a diagnosis when you have a hormonal condition, and I know that you appreciate this both from the perspective of being a physician, but also from being a functional practitioner. Traditional medicine doesn't really have a lot of great tools for systemic, chronic, endocrine, matrix-related types of conditions in the body. So it's either surgery or medication, but if those two things are not indicated, you could have a diagnosis but not have a course of treatment. Equally
Yeah,
frustrating.
exactly. You see, the reason why so many people, millions of people in our country, end up on the wrong road. They're misled, not just not diagnosed, but they're told, no, you don't have a thyroid problem. No, your gut is fine. And they're actually misled. Establishment to this day is rooted in the model of disease as a thing. In other words, as opposed to a process.
Right.
Either you have this thing called the disease, disease A, disease B, disease C, that can be remedied with drug A, drug B, or drug C, or you are fine. The other way, in other words, there's nothing in between. It's
Right.
black and white.
That's right.
If you have this, then you are fine. If you're not fine, well, it's in your head. You need a vacation. You're stressed. You're getting older. But X, Y, and Z. However, the other model, which in my opinion, time has shown us that this other model must be the model of choice. It must be the model that we use today to properly help people to really make better accomplishments in overcoming disease and improving our health is the physiological approach or the ecological approach to disease, in that disease and health is a process. It's a process amongst many, many processes, a flow of systems interconnecting that has no boundaries between the self and the others, the other, the self and nature. It's and within. And science is confirming this model over and over again. We just have to have the eyes to see and to proper interpret the flood of information that we are being sent. And when we adopt this model, magic begins to happen, Alisa, that all of a sudden we understand what's going on. People think I'm so smart. I'm not so smart. I'm just applying a model that works better.
Yes.
And all of a sudden, the answers are lining up. They're stacking up. Here are your answers. It's not because...
And it's so exciting because it's such an exciting time in health in medicine, in functional medicine, because the research is, I think, coming out now like not like a drip out of the faucet, but more like a fire hose. And we are getting just study after study that, conclusively shows linkages between dietary, lifestyle, environmental factors, and how that really plays out in the intersection of all these different systems in the body, and how really truly empowered each of us are to take a leadership role in how our health plays out. So, always, of course, knowledge is power, but no more true is that than today, because there's so much more information that we can arm ourselves with to make the right choices, to have better health outcomes and to have better health care outcomes. So let's talk about some of your, really unique approach in terms of testing and looking at some of these systems, and especially the microbiome. I mean, microbiome is such a big, exciting term, and I think, you've been talking about this for years, but it's finally made the news, as these things always take some time to reach mainstream consciousness. But hey, that's a good thing. Whenever they get there, they get there. So the question is, if we're just now starting to think about, gee, is my microbiome okay? First, let's start with, what would you tell a woman who might be suspicious that her microbiome is off because she's having some issues? What are some symptoms that she should look for, both with obvious gut things and maybe some hormonal things?
Right, that's the point. There are some very obvious symptoms that relate to the gut, that it's coming from the gut, but then there are many symptoms that you would be shocked is actually rooted in the gut, specifically in the gut bacteria, the microbiome, the trillions of friendly bacteria, our greatest ancient ally, as I call them, that they may not be functioning as well. Your ally, your most important ally, may be a little weakened. And that's why you're having the myriad of symptoms you're having. So, for example, if a woman comes to see me and she complains of brain fog, memory is not as good, and have bloating. Do you have constipation? Well, I have my doctor said no. I mean, as long as I have a bowel movement a few times a week, but no, that's not acceptable. Do you have a bowel movement every day? Well, no, I don't. Then already there's gastrointestinal problems. And here is really a very important point. If you have depression and anxiety, and you don't even notice any gut symptoms at all, you likely, very, very likely, according to the latest research on the microbiome, have a gut problem. And the source of your problem is in the gut microbiome. Who would have known that an organ so seemingly far away, all the way up here in your brain, is actually the cause of the problems that you think is up there, is actually down here in the gut? Who would have known? And the answer is, it frequently is. And even if an antidepressant is helping, or natural compounds are helping, if you want to see another 10, 20, 30% improvement, if you want a true adjunct, well, look to the microbiome for your answers. And specifically, if you haven't been treated at all, the first place to start is to heal the microbiome.
So how do we get? I mean, let's say someone says, okay, you know what? I'm very substantially suspicious that, I have anxiety, I have the fog, I have obvious gut issues, I have some hormonal problems going on. I would like to investigate my microbiome. What kinds of testing should we be reaching out for?
Okay, so first of all, to listen to the symptoms, to the constellation of symptoms, and that to understand the connection. So that's the most important, that the symptoms, the diagnosis is made by, not by testing first and foremost, but by understanding links, by understanding how to connect dots. And
actually, I want to pause there, Dr. Kellman, because what you just said is so profoundly important and liberating for the everyday woman who's trying to navigate her fluctuating health reality, right? Because in a traditional medical model, like you were saying, it's black or white. You must go to a test to determine if you're okay or not. But in the model that you're talking about, which is a more systemic, holistic worldview of the body, it is really about this experiential observation of the constellation of symptoms, because there's no person better able to assess that than the individual themselves, right?
That's right.
So, for
Yeah.
those of you who are watching this, if you have always been sort of feeling like you can't trust your gut, pun intended, about, I have these symptoms, I think they're connected. To me, it all paints a picture that I can see that makes the sort of points to the root cause of what's not right with my health. Yet, you feel like you have to doubt that inner voice because there isn't a test. Dr. Kellman has just wiped the slate clean, liberated you from that concern. You can actually feel very confident that your observation is very vital.
Absolutely. We're given gut feelings, gut intuition. We all have a little bit of a healer within us. One of my important goals is to help people develop that, for first doctors and healers, but also the individual, to help develop and amplify your ability to be able to understand your body better, to be able to understand principles of healing, so you could help yourself and help others. And trust in your gut, and let's get this information out to show how we connect the dots. We're flooded with information today. The issue isn't getting more information, Alisa. The answer is how to assemble the information, how to make sense out of the information, how to know what information is important and how does it stack up. How do we paint a beautiful painting out of all of the dots so that we can better understand the information that's in front of us? And that's why it's so important to know the principles of healing, why you have to have this high vantage point in order to better understand health and disease. So getting to the microbiome, if you have symptoms of anxiety and your mood is not as good and brain fog, and you notice that your metabolism is changing and that something is off within you, well, think about the microbiome as a critical cause. Now, let me explain why. We co-evolved, or we were co-created, however you want to look at it. To me, it's the same, that for these bacteria, these are friendly bacteria. Again, changing our way of understanding things. Bacteria are the good guys. They're here to help us. They co-evolved with us because and 90% of who we are bacteria. So if that's the
Wait,
case,
people, ready? Listen,
digest
90,
that.
90% of who we are is because of these bacteria and comprised of these bacteria. In fact, just to be extra nerdy, for those of you who have followed sort of the evolutionary process of the planet, these bacteria were the first inhabitants and really facilitated all of the changes that happened on the planet that facilitated us being able to be here today. So we are of them, they are in us. It's a whole beautiful symbiotic relationship. And we kind of have to take care of them a little bit because we've been destroying the ecosystem that they so carefully crafted on our behalf.
Right. Folks, we are not an I or a me. We are a we. We all are a we, but we have the opportunity to be a benevolent queen or king over our we. Unfortunately, we could be the opposite and not take control, but we could be empowered by having and understanding this opportunity to really make a difference, in ourselves and in others. So here, once we understand that the microbiome is 90% of who we are, and they hold the master key to our biochemistry, to our physiology, to our genetics, to our neurochemistry. They hold the master key. They know how to get in deep recesses of our genetic mystery. And I'm not just talking about the biochemistry, I'm talking about the energetics. They hold the master key. In fact, you could look at the microbiome as a vast collection of mysterious DNA. because that's why they have such magic, because their DNA is constantly replicating and changing and transforming, and they're bringing in new DNA for better. So trust in this ally. If that's the case, doesn't it make sense that if you have a health issue, it's likely that the microbiome is playing a role, and that if we heal the microbiome, it will help you get better? The answer is yes.
I'm nodding my head violently. Yes.
Now
Yes.
I'm going to tell you, and that's what this book, and it's just the beginning, how to help your microbiome so that it can help you. And once you know that, then you'll realize that you can absolutely be on a path of healing without the fancy blood tests. I'm not saying not to do them, but realize that a lot of the tests that you're going to get, the old time tests, I'll tell you about some new ones, are not going to reveal what's going on in the microbiome. They'll tell you about your cholesterol, they'll tell you about your blood pressure, but they're not going to explain the myriad of symptoms that we're speaking about today.
Right.
So, and by the way, these symptoms today are the antecedents of chronic disease tomorrow.
That's
so
right.
therefore, there are two important reasons why we need to address it. One, to alleviate suffering and to bring you back onto the correct road, the true road to healing, so you'll feel better now. But two, for the prevention of disease for tomorrow. That's why I say, Alisa, that our approach at the Kellman Center, it changes the trajectory of your life. I see it in front of me that if they would continue on this path with the top doctor, the head of the department of, the biggest institution in the Western Hemisphere, they're going to be on the wrong road frequently. Yes, their blood pressure may be lower and their cholesterol may be lower, but that's really not going to fully change the trajectory of their lives.
It's so true. And
this will.
This is something that, I'm constantly sharing with all of our flow community, which is, this little kind of thing that we make a joke of, right? The PMS that we have before we have our period, right? The reasons why you're having PMS have to do with hormone imbalances, have to do with gut imbalances, have to do with micronutrient deficiencies. And these things taken over the trajectory of 10 years, 20 years, sets you up for inflammation that leads to chronic diseases. It's something that we see all the time. And it's also something that the NIH, for example, with the biocycle study has come out and shown linkages between these little harmless, quote unquote, hormonal problems that we think are things we don't have to deal with, which I like that you're smiling because we do have to deal with them, and chronic disease postmenopausally. So I couldn't agree with you more that if you want to do one thing to change the trajectory of not only your health but your life, it's really investing in taking the right care of your body. And I just absolutely love that you're a proponent of this, because I think for women, there's just this kind of cultural messaging, don't you think, that says, it's all in your head, or you should kind of tolerate not feeling great most of the time. And it's normal that, one half of the month you feel okay and the other half you don't. And it's just part of being a woman. It's a part of getting older. It's a part of this. We kind of explain it away in this sort of cultural mythology. And it's so disempowering. And it's also completely not factually sound, especially with everything that's coming out in the research today. So, I love that we're having this conversation, and I hope for those of you who are watching, you feeling even more fired up to take charge of your hormonal destiny, because you can.
Absolutely, and you're right, Alisa, that hormones, the deficiencies, microbiome's not healthy, and that's another conversation. But let's remember that if your microbiome's not healthy, you're more likely to be deficient in thyroid hormone. Perhaps up to 20% of some thyroid hormone could be lower because of gut issues. Progesterone may be an issue, but also the stress that it's going to set up. The microbiome that's unhealthy will translate into an immunological issue, which will then translate into endocrine issues, because these systems are constantly communicating, and that activation of the stress axis is going to affect your estrogen and progesterone. So yes, if you have symptoms related to your hormones, whether it's PMS or menopausal symptoms that are not balanced, for many reasons, or many
or
symptoms.
fertility, this the stress axis that you're talking about,
That's right.
I know the research about the estrobolome and sort of its effects on your capacity to metabolize estrogen efficiently, which is
Absolutely.
key because so many women are estrogen dominant these days, which is a part of the problem of all of these chronic hormonal issues.
Exactly.
You not getting a control on your gut health can really completely derail you when it comes to your hormonal balance capacity and turn on this inflammation stress
That's right.
axis that can completely undermine your fertility, short term, long term. It used to be just that it was like women over a certain age would have this issue. Now, depending on the severity of your gut issues, this could be happening to you. You could have infertility coming at you sideways in your 20s.
Yeah,
And it's
exactly.
unfortunate, but this is what the situation is.
Exactly. Remember that stress could be originating from an altered microbiome. So one of the blood tests, Lisa, that I would recommend
Mm.
for patients, at least to try to get, is vitamin levels. Do you know that most of the B vitamins are produced by the microbiome? I always joke and I say, I'm going to repeat the joke. If anyone heard it, I'm sorry, but it's worth hearing again, that the closest GNC to you is right here in your gut.
Oh, I love that. I haven't heard that joke before.
Oh, okay, you didn't hear it. So, okay, I'm embarrassed. I keep on using it. But
Oh,
here's the
and
point.
does GNC then stand for gut nutrition creator?
Oh, oh, wow, that's great.
I
Listen,
do
I
love
hope
my
GNC
three-letter
stands
acronyms. Yes.
to remember that. So many of the B vitamins are produced in your gut. So when I see a B1, B6, B12 deficiency, I know that the microbiome is not healthy because they're supposed to be producing some of these vitamins. Also, if I see a zinc deficiency, it's a
Mm,
surefire sign that the gut wall is not healthy. And it's not healthy
mm,
because the gut bacteria, the microbiome, may not be as diverse as it used to be. And the gut wall is a little bit inflamed and perhaps more permeable to toxins,
right,
but less permeable to nutrients.
right.
That's the ironic paradox. So that's the first step. You can also get levels, which is what we do. It's not, again, unfortunately, this is not the standard model and blood test, but I'm saying it so that it will start to plant seeds
Yes.
so that more doctors are ordering these tests. We're planting seeds here so that more, deeper testing is done, that we'd start looking in a different direction. Let's look from a higher vantage point, right?
Yeah,
Let's
yeah.
collect different data, right? That is more important. We're connecting different dots. Get those blood tests. You can also get a butyrate level,
Mm,
not only in the stool but in the blood. Now, why butyrate? Butyrate is a compound, is a short chain fatty acid produced by our greatest ally, the microbiome. If your butyrate is low, well, then that means your microbiome is weakened.
mm,
And butyrate is such an important compound. It's an anti-inflammatory
mm.
compound. It speaks to the genes. Do you know that it turns on anti-inflammatory genes? It even turns on fat breakdown genes. I mean, it's incredible
So
that
the
it.
microbiome and your epigenetic switches are linked.
Oh, the microbiome is the epigenetics par excellence.
Wonderful, wonderful.
They speak to the genes. Microbiome is epigenetics. The commercial Hotel Trivago.
Yes,
I don't know. I
yes,
once in a
yes.
while I. Okay, so when you think of microbiome, think of epigenetics. Epigenetics, microbiome. The microbiome is the information that turns the genes on and off, the right sequence of the genes. We've been so misled about the genome. oh, now that we've decoded the whole genome, we're going to live forever. And this is the path to eternity
Right. And
and
telomeres and
right,
yes, yeah.
ultimate happiness, et cetera, et cetera. And it's led us down that same wrong road that you, all your listeners, are on as well, because they're told, no, you don't have a thyroid problem. No, no, your thyroid's fine. Your blood tests are normal. No, there's nothing wrong with your gut. I did the blood test. We did a sonogram. You went to a gas. They did an endoscopy. There's nothing wrong. You're fine. You're fine.
So
Just relax.
are you saying then that the whole genomic testing kind of popularity that's gaining, do you feel that that's a similar binary view that we're taking potentially with health, that, okay, it's just your genetic sequencing, there's nothing that you can do, it's your genes, are you concerned
No,
that we'll
no,
be thinking that
no, I'm
way?
not. No.
Okay.
You see, what I'm not interested as much, that's not for me. I'm not saying it's not important. There is some importance to it, but it's 2% compared to what I'm talking about, the true epigenetics, and nutrigenomics and microbiome genetics, we should call it, microbiome epigenetics, in that it's not so much the genes that you're born with, it's how is that keyboard being played? Is it being played,
Mm.
as a symphony, as a beautiful Beethoven or a Mozart symphony, or is it just banging noise?
Well, and I think that's an important point because, as more technology arises in our ability to test, you still, as a consumer of these things, are going to have to navigate the right path for you. And instead of just thinking that, be cautious not to be disempowered with all of this type of testing, because as you said, it's 2%, right? So your genetic information is potentially 2% of what's causing your health issues, but the rest is all the things that you're responsible for in your day-to-day life and diet. And yeah, at first that can seem a little overwhelming at first, but as somebody who's been living this way for almost 20 years, I know you're someone who practices what he preaches as well. It becomes much easier. And we're going to talk a minute about diet, but starting with some of these tests can be a great way to get you motivated to know, okay, you know what, my B vitamins are deficient. I'm certainly going to start with a supplement, but I also know I need to eat foods that are rich in B vitamins because supplements alone don't get us there, etc. And it can motivate you to make those changes. But, at the end of the day, I would say you would agree with me that you can have all the tests done in the world, but if you're not willing to put different food on your plate and put that different food in your mouth, it really isn't going to have much more than, information on a piece of paper for you, right?
Absolutely. I think the diet of eating foods that improve the health of the microbiome that I outline in the microbiome diet will
Got to get the
probably
book. Got to get the
will
book.
get the information. Just it will be, yeah, get the book. It will be probably the most important information in terms of diet that you're ever going to receive. Why? Not, I mean, I didn't make up this diet, Lisa. This is the diet that science is revealing. That it's just learning about the microbiome, that we've discovered something that's been with us for forever. And wow, we've missed this organ. I did cadaver dissections, and they showed me the liver, they showed me the gallbladder and the brain and the intestines, but they left out an organ. They
Mm.
left out the organ called the microbiome, and now researchers are saying that is an organ. That
Mm.
is an organ that feeds all the organs, that has far reach into every single organ, and yet I was not shown that organ in medical school because it was invisible. They couldn't see it, but now we can see it. So this organ is the most important organ in our body, and this information in the microbiome diet is about the foods that will help them help you. They've been helping us tremendously. It's time for us to repay them a little bit,
So give us
heal them
give
with
us a
this.
taste, because one of the things that I think is really important is, you hear people talk about take a probiotic, but I know that if it's not taken in the right internal ecosystem in the gut, you can take these probiotics, and they can be helpful while you're very vigilant about taking them. But as soon as you stop taking them, like a person on vacation, they're kind of going to leave the gut. So talk to us a little bit about the difference between prebiotics, probiotics, and then
Yes.
would you give us a little taste of what some of those foods, ideal gut foods, are? Just a few, just so that we can make
Yes.
sure we're having them for lunch or dinner after we watch this video.
Yes. Okay. So Lisa, this is a very important point that, probiotics are great, and we could target specific issues with different types of strains collectively to heal. Absolutely. But we must first focus on the foundation, and that is to clean and heal the gut with, first of all, removing the foods that are unhealthy for the microbiome. And it's not just refined carbs and excessive carbohydrates, and it's packaged foods, processed
Yeah,
foods,
yeah,
even GMO, foods that are genetically modified. Again, it's another subject. It's
yeah.
unhealthy to throw in genetically modified genes into a genetic pool that's here to help you called the microbiota, the microbiome. So, the pesticides and insecticides, let's clean ourselves from that, number one. Then let's focus on the foods that heal the microbiome, that will repay you a hundredfold if you take this advice. Feed them the foods they need: jicama, radishes, leeks, asparagus, kiwi. These are just some of the foods. You don't have to give them a lot. They're not greedy. They just need a little bit to survive.
I bet
Hard to
they're
believe.
efficient little buggers, actually.
It's hard to believe that nature is not greedy, but it's not. And they just take care of your queendom, of your kingdom.
Mm,
Feed them with some concentration and concern. That's all. That's all we
mm.
need. That's all they need. And then after that's done, we can then begin to focus on some of the targeted probiotics that work synergistically. But sometimes, there's one caveat, sometimes there's a lot of bacterial overgrowth, and there are ways of testing for it. There's symptoms and questionnaires that we could, give you, or that you can get. Sometimes I frequently do a small bowel breath test. It's a way of detecting for bacterial overgrowth, by the way, not just in the small bowel, but everywhere, in the intestines. And then that, I find I get better results than stool testing, because stool testing is only picking up what's in the stool. But what about what's deep entrenched in the gut wall? That's why the breath test may be a very good option, because then if you do have bacterial overgrowth, there are certain prebiotic foods like resistant starches that you would not want to focus on at the
Mm-hmm.
beginning. And the other prebiotics like jicama and in other inulin containing foods in moderation are fine. Like jicama and radishes are
Right, and
fine,
you're saying this
but
because
some of the beans.
to just to quickly translate why you're saying this is because if there's an overgrowth of this bad bacteria, you don't want to feed them the substances that are going to allow them to continue to proliferate wildly, right? So you want to kind of starve all the bacteria temporarily, boost up some of the good stores with probiotics, and then reintroduce these prebiotic foods. Yeah, so it's you need to be,
Right, right. So,
yeah,
there is a process. My nutritionist who works at our center, Jennifer, she's like the expert at this, about the diet that you need to use just temporarily to help with bacterial overgrowth. But that being said, um, so that's another test that people could do to properly evaluate the microbiome. And then, you may need to reduce the prebiotics. Jennifer recommends not even to take prebiotics as a supplement if you have a lot of bacterial overgrowth. So if you can't do this small bowel breath test for whatever reason, um, and you have a lot of gas, let's say, then you may want to go slow at the beginning with the prebiotics. With the foods like jicama, I think, and radishes are fine, and Jerusalem artichoke, but not the beans. and then first start with some herbs that will remove, or I don't like to use that language, that will prune the microbiome, so you'll have a better ecosystem within. That some of the overgrowth will be pruned off the microbiome, and it will be better balanced and in better proportion. And those herbs are also outlined in my book and in many others. And then you can start adding more of the prebiotics, both in foods and in the supplements,
This is
because
great.
there are prebiotic supplements.
This is great to hear, because for all of you ladies who are eating for your flow, you're already doing a lot of the things that you need to be doing to support this prebiotic, promoting ecosystem, and you're doing it in a way that really works along with your cycle, which is sort of unique to eating in your flow. But if you suspect that you have more significant microbiome challenges, I would very much encourage you to pick up Dr. Kellman's book, the Microbiome Diet book, and take a look at, some of these symptoms, take a look at some of the ways in which you can start modifying the diet that you're using at Flow Living to really incorporate more of these prebiotic foods, to maybe even refine some of the supplementation that you're using. That's what's so great about what's going on in healthcare today, is that with more research and more information coming out and more wonderful practitioners sharing their voices, there are so many things that you can bring together synergistically. So you can be eating for your hormones and be supporting your microbiome, and it's an additive process. And I really wanted to share Dr. Kellman's work with you, because to me, this microbiome conversation is probably the most cutting edge, future, important piece of information that we get to have some real tangible scientific information about, that helps us connect those dots to all the things and symptoms and gut intuition that we've been feeling that's been off. Now there's proof in the petri dish, and that's really cool, because for years and years we've been operating a little bit without that proof, and so sometimes we stray from our path of self-care because we think, well, maybe it's not, none of this is working anyway. But the research is in, it's working, it's important, you have to be eating the right way in order to be healthy, because you want to feed this microbiome, as you've so eloquently shared with us today. So get the book. And for those of you who are lucky enough to be able to come and see Dr. Kellman, you can check out his information and contact information at thekellmancenter.com. And, he's a great resource for all of our flow ladies, and perhaps we'll even find ways in the future to collaborate a little bit more deeply, because I feel such a kindred energy with you, Dr. Kellman. So great what you're doing. Is there anything that you want to sort of end with for women who, they're trying to get their period regulated, they're trying to have a baby, they're trying to navigate perimenopause and keep their mood and sex drive and energy and all of that? Is there anything that you want to sort of share as we wrap up today's call to give them a sense of hope that they really can turn this around for themselves?
Yes, Lisa. I think the hormone issue is another big problem. It is related to the microbiome to some degree, but for the constellation of symptoms that you just mentioned, even if doctors are telling you that all your hormone blood testing is normal, there's research to show that there's a difference between the population reference range and the individual reference range. You are, I know. You want to look up, his name is Anderson. I think he was the one who coined this term. And yet, again, the information is out there, but who's picking up that information? That's the issue.
That's the
So
issue.
pick up that piece of advice from this researcher and many others. Your reference range may be, let's say, from zero point 0.8 to 1.4. The population may be from 0.6 to 5. But for you, your range is here. The population is here. So when you go outside of your reference range, you're not healthy.
That's
It
right.
may mean that you can't get pregnant. It may mean that you're going to live the rest of your life with fatigue and suboptimal brain function. And I'm not even talking about go for optimal levels. Forget about that goal, optimal levels that a lot of functional medicine doctors talk about. I'm talking about basic levels,
Functional
what your
levels.
crew needs, functional, so that you don't
Yeah.
have brain fog the
Yeah.
rest of your life.
Yeah.
Your reference range is different. And, I do use better tests. I search for tests that have been discarded. One of the key ones that, the priests of medicine have discarded was the TRH stimulation test for the thyroid. And we don't need it anymore. It's a provocation. Just do the routine test. That gives you all the answers. I remembered that. It was one piece of advice, of information floating out there in cyberspace that I connected to these dots of all these symptoms that people were complaining about over and over again. And I downloaded it from cyberspace. I resurrected it, and I'm encouraging other doctors and health professionals to learn about it. It's been out of vogue for a long time. I was lucky enough to realize its importance the year it was going out of vogue and everyone forgot about it. And I got trained by an old timer how to do this test. No one knows how to use it anymore except for the few people that I taught. But the point is, a test like this is showing us that you can't rely on the routine tests frequently. They do pick up millions of people. That just shows that we're dealing with hormonal epidemics.
Yes, we
But
are.
we are, but if you're being told that your fatigue and brain fog and difficulty getting pregnant and other
And
symptoms,
nothing's wrong with you because the tests are coming back
yeah,
within normal range. Yes, yes, we've all heard it. We've all heard it. It's
don't
terrible.
believe
It's
it.
frustrating, and I love that you shared that because for years we've been advocating at Flow Living that women establish a baseline panel of what's normal for them when they are feeling good, right? What part of the problem is you can only get tested when you're already feeling bad. So make sure that you take some tests over a period of time where you're feeling good so that you can see what normal ranges are for you, your personal reference range. So, so important. And that way, when things are slightly off, you're off within the context of your personal reference range, not the sort of population reference range. I love that you just said that. I think it's so vital for women to hear from as many of us as they can. So thank you for that. And for women who are listening, my Flow family, this is such an empowering conversation. I feel like we could talk to Dr. Kellman for days. We should probably do some more chats with him. I think, we might. And, just to have you all feel so personally capable of really turning your health issues around. I mean, to hear all of the different things that you've shared today, Dr. Kellman, really makes me feel like so grateful that I've been eating this way for 17 years. I know for a fact that it's what has been responsible for me turning around my PCOS, what's been responsible for me being able to have my first child at advanced maternal age and to be recovered so quickly and, and to be healthy and functional and doing all that I do is because I feed my body properly. And I think it's just so wonderful to have you connecting the science and the research for us that what we eat fuels the organ, the microbiota, that fuels us is such a wonderful new concept, but an old one that we just couldn't see, as you said, that we're really able to now put into action in our everyday lives, on our plates, with our forks, in our kitchen, with our families, so that we can really affect our own health, but also the people that we love. So thank you for bringing this research forward and for being such a pioneer in this conversation and for just being such an advocate for people to really get the information that they need and the root to get to that root cause, to not just feel like it's okay for everybody to settle on feeling badly. So thank you for all of your hard work on that.
my pleasure. And to all your listeners, stick with Alisa. She's on the right road. I so much appreciate it.
Thank
And
you.
I'll join you. I'll be one of your listeners.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, we have more to chat about, I'm sure. So everyone, please make sure to check out Dr. Kellman's book, The Microbiome Diet, and check out his center, thekelmancenter.com. And Dr. Kellman, thank you again. We will talk to you hopefully another time, truly.
I enjoyed it very much. Thank you, Alisa. It was
All right,
great.
everyone, have a great time, and don't forget, eat for your flow. Bye-bye.